Hello, welcome. I'm Pauline from PQW. I'm delighted you could join us. This is just a brief little lesson on making a beautiful table runner. It's all about using our mandala oval tools and what you can create with those shapes. I've got a little table runner here. You could make it into a bigger table runner. You could make it into a bed topper. You could, just use half of it and make a cushion. You could use this design to make for a border of a quilt. There's so many things you could use this design for. But it's all about teaching you how simple these shapes can be to cut out. We're going to make some bias, and we're going to do some raw edge applique, and then we're going to do some quilting, some echo quilting. So it's all exciting stuff. It's basic, but it will teach you a lot of technique. If you look at the quilt on the back area here, this quilt was made with the same tools that we're going to make the little table runner out of. So with that set of templates, you can create any size almond shape or any style of oval shape. So they're a great set of tools that come in so many different sizes. So the sky's the limit with what you can create. I don't know whether the camera can pick up the set up the top there, but this is how they come. That set at the front is the Oval Mandela tool set that we have. So now let's go through the other tools that we will use to make this. I've made the table runner out of a beautiful jelly roll set, batiks, and we have these on our website. They're just beautiful, beautiful colours, and there's so many different combinations that you can choose. So a jelly roll pack, or you can just use your scraps of fabric. That's entirely up to you. The set of templates, we're going to work with a couple of different sizes, the 3 to 5 inch and the 2 to 4 inch. We're going to use those, but these are the larger ones I've used on the quilt that you've seen. We're going to use the Roxanne glue basted. We're going to use the 3/8 inch sasha tool. We're going to use a Bohin fabric marking pencil, which I really, really love to use. It has black and white leads in it, and I found that it is the marking pencil that will mark any fabric that I want to mark, and it will also come out. It doesn't leave any residue. It washes out, you can erase it out. It's just a beautiful pencil to use. We're going to use the beautiful monopoly clear thread in the top and the bobbin of the machine when we do our applique, our raw edge applique. And when I make all of my quilts, my favourite batting is, you may call it batting, you may call it wadding, just depends what country you live in, but it is a double-sided fusible batting. It's produced by Hobbs Batting out of one of their ranges. I love it that I can iron my 3 layers together. I don't have to pin anything. It just sits there beautifully while I do my applique and my quilting. So we're going to talk about all of these things as we go through and teach you step by step how to make this lovely little runner. So let's get started. We'll just put all of this aside. I'm going to use my workboard, my little workboard, because I just find it helps me organise myself. It's an ironing mat, it's a cutting mat, and then I have sandpaper on this side. So when I trace out all of around my templates, I'm going to put my fabric on this sandpaper part of the board so my fabric does not stretch as I cut. So now with these shapes on our table runner, you can make this almond shape any size you want, but as I said, we're going to use the 3 and the 4 inch. Now each one of these templates, I'll put this down so you can see it, it has a 4 inch mark, which is the outside part measurement, and the 2 inch is the inside measurement. And we'll just explain a bit more of that as we go along. So we'll get one of our strips from our jelly roll, pop that down. It might be easier if we place it this way, you might see better. Now, looking at this template, we have a solid line on both sides, and then we have a jotted line on each side. So if you want to create the oval, you will draw from jot line to jot line. if you want to create the almond shape, you draw from solid line to solid line, and then you flip your template over. So I have the black lead in my pencil here, which will show up on this fabric. We'll come down so we don't waste the fabric. Trace, and you can notice that my fabric's not stretchy because I've got it on that sandpaper. So I've gone from the solid line to the solid line. I'm going to flip the template, align that solid line right to the edge of my drawn line on both sides, and trace. So there's our almond shape. If I wanted to do a bigger size out of this colour, I would trace from this line to this line, flip the template and do it then. So then I've got different size almonds, and I just keep going through and choosing different coloured fabrics till I had enough. And in this workshop there are PDF notes for you to download so that you can see how many you need of each size. In your PDF notes, these little buds here that we call them, that's on the little runner, they are on the PDF notes. They're little pattern pieces that you can trace off and trace onto your fabric. So now you can either cut these out with scissors. I find the best and easiest way for me to cut out is I use a little mini rotary cutter. I'll just grab it out of my drawer. Oh, here it is. So I like to use the little 18mm rotary cutter because I find it's just gentler on my hands. I get a much neater cut and I can see exactly where I'm cutting because the blade's not too big that it obscures the line. So just cut that out. So once you get a lot of those cut out, you are then ready to position them all. So I have quite a few cut out here ready. Now what we're going to do is cut our background fabric, your backing fabric, and a piece of batting to the size that you desire, like we have here. Now I've got my top fabric, I've got my batting, and I've got my backing. Now what we do is just lay the 3 layers out on an ironing surface. I'll just open this out so I've got a bigger ironing surface. Lay the 3 layers out. You don't really have to leave a lot of extra room with your backing and batting like you do with battings that you have to pin together because this doesn't move as much. Then with a regular hot dry iron, we just press. I'm just using my little mini iron and it works perfectly for this small piece. But don't be afraid to use your big regular iron. If the iron sits onto the batting, the fusible web does not stick to your iron. It's really lovely product to use. It feels a little bit stiff to start with, but it's not going to continue to stay stiff. Because the adhesive is so light, it washes out when you wash your project for the first time, and even when you're working with it, the adhesive seems to disappear. Turn it over, just flatten it out, and press the back. And I've not been able to find any other batting that works for me as well as this one does, but you may have your favourite one that you want to use, but I just find this works beautifully. The other thing I find that it doesn't clog up on my needle. It just sits there beautifully. So now we're ready to lay out all of our pieces, and the reason I've put the batting and the backing together with my top fabric, I find if I just did my applique on one piece of fabric, when I stitch all the appliques on, I get a lot of puckering from this fabric. But having the 3 layers together and appliquing right through the 3 layers, we get a beautiful result. So I'm going to turn this one over and hopefully we can pick it up. Because if you have a look here, you can see where I've stitched the little almond shapes on. You can see those. And where I've stitched the little buds on. That's all part of my quilting design now. So it really gives the back of your project a really nice look when you applique right through to the back of your project. Even with a quilt, do your appliques before you do the quilting, and it makes it so much easier, and you get a beautiful, beautiful design flow happening. And then we just echo around the shapes. So now before we go on to putting our leaves down and our little buds, we're going to need to make some bias. So we're going to make some bias now and show you how easy that is to make. So now to make our bias, we're going to use the bias sasha ruler, this ruler here, and this is what we'll use to cut all the strips to make that bias that runs through our little runner. Now we'll use the little cutting mat once again. I'll just turn that around. This is the fabric that I have chosen to use. So, you know, apart from using your jelly roll, you will need some other fabrics, for example, for the bias and for the binding. You'll get your little buds out of the jelly roll, but, you know, just pull fabrics out of your stash. That is fine to use for making this. Now we need to make sure our edges are straight. So I'm just going to fold this fabric so that I can get the edge nice and straight along here. I'll just use this line on my ruler on the folded edge. I'll check in here that I've got all my layers in. And still I can use the little tiny cutter to cut across there to straighten that off. And it's important to have straight edges. Now this edge is fairly straight, I'm happy with that. So now on our ruler, we've got all of these diagonal lines. So we've got them running this way and this way. I found on all the other rulers that I owned, I only had one 45-degree angle. So if I put my 45-degree angle on the side of my fabric, I didn't know whether I was still on the 45-degree angle up here. So having the lines coming in both directions, I can double check that I've got that on the true bias running across there. So we're going to line one of these lines parallel on this side of the fabric and this line running parallel across the top of the fabric. Then we've got the true bias. And like the true bias doesn't really matter doing something like this table runner because we haven't got big sharp curves. But if we're certainly going around tight circles or anything or around great big curves, we would need it on the true bias. And if you want to know more about cutting your fabric on the bias, go to our YouTube channel because I do have a really great video there on cutting the fabric on the true bias and some of the things you can make with that bias. So here we go. We'll just cut this off, just move it down a bit so I can fit it all, that one cut onto the board. You know, and you possibly will be using your big cutting mat so you won't have to fiddle like I'm fiddling here. Actually, I might come back to this section here, do a shorter cut. So we'll cut across and there's our first strip. Now I could just lay one of these lines on this edge and cut across there, but if I've got a much bigger cut, I don't want to keep moving the ruler across. So what I normally do, I take this straight edge up to this straight edge. And if it's a longer piece of fabric, I would make sure these two edges are exactly level. Fold it again. The more times you fold it, the shorter the cut will be and the more accurate your cut will be. Now I just need to flip this over so I'm cutting the right way. And we'll just cut a couple of strips. Now I'm going to use the 3/8 of an inch sasha tool, this one. So I need to cut my fabric double the measurement of that. So I'm going to cut the strip 3/4 of an inch wide. So we'll just lay this down. We're going to lay one of these lines, oops, just get that all straight. One of these lines right on this diagonal line here. And I'll cut at the 3/4 mark. And we'll just cut a couple of strips to get us started. And we open it out and then we've got our nice strips cut. But if you've got a much longer piece, you'd end up with a much longer piece of bias. Now to make that sashing, we're going to use that 3/8 of an inch tool. We're going to simply fold our fabric in and in till it meets on both sides. And just a little bit fiddly, you can do this with your big iron, just fold that for about the 1st inch and press it. Because that makes it much easier and neater for you to get through those little splits in the sasher tool. Hold the tool by the handle. Put the fabric so the folded edge is facing down to your ironing surface. Come up through from the bottom and go back down. Now we need to pin that into the ironing surface, and I use the double fork pin. This is a twin pin. If you haven't seen those before, they're used for piecing your blocks together when you're trying to match your points. They're a fabulous tool. I find that pinning into this piece of fabric with both pins going in together, I get really, really equal tension on both sides of that bias strip. If I use one pin or two separate pins, I could expect my bias strip to stretch on one side compared to the other. Hold the fabric off the ironing surface just a little bit. Don't stretch it because it is on the bias and you don't want to stretch that. The curve in the sasher tool is designed to fit the side of any iron. You will possibly use your big iron if you don't have a little mini iron, and then we just press. Just push down with the iron and you get your bias strip made. Then when you get all the strips made, we're going to then lay it in place, which is a very, very simple technique. I'm going to make some more strips, so I've got a couple of strips to show you what we're going to be doing. When we do that, glue that down, we'll then glue all the leaves in place, and then we'll put our little buds on, and we're going to go to the sewing machine and do some wonderful stitching around the edge of all the shapes, and then we'll do some echo quilting, which is a really nice thing to do. And you don't have to be a good quilter to do echo quilting. Okay, so now I'm going to make a big long strip, and this time I'm just going to show you a narrower strip. If you want to make your strips narrower, you could use the 1/4 inch sasher tool, which we just need to get one out of the drawer. And there's no rule or to what size you make your bias. It's entirely up to you. You might want 1/2 inch bias. But the rule is whatever the size is on the tool, that's your finished measurement. 1/4 inch, you cut your strips 1/2 inch. 3/8, you cut it 3/4. So there's no real maths to it. It's just doubling the finished size measurement. So place this one down. We're going to fold this up and over, back down. And on our website, you can buy bundles. You know, you can buy each thing individually, or you could buy them as a set. It's entirely up to you. Just have a look around and shop to your needs. So you can see how easy the finer one comes through as well. So there we have a nice long piece made. Now we'll go back to our background fabric. We've got this all lined up. Now you might like to draw a line on here how you want your bias to go, and if you're going to do that, just use your pencil and just draw yourself a line of where you might like this to go. And just drawing some lines like this, you get an idea of how it's all going to flow. But remember, leave room on the edges for your buds or your leaves to go on. You don't want to go right out to the edge and then have to put a bud and then reposition it a bit later on. Now we're going to use the glue, and we need to put these side bits down first because we want this big long one to come over the top. Just all we need is little dots of glue. Now if I drew this line and I realise that I've gone too close to the edge, I can use the eraser on the end of the tool and I can erase that line out, and I might want to reposition it back in here a bit. So I find once we get the right set of tools together, it makes our job very easy. I'm going to nip this end off. Just turn this around. I'll start up here and just use your iron. This is where the little mini irons come in very handy. There's a lot of different ones out there, but I particularly like this one. So there's your bias in place. Nip it off. Then you'd put these other pieces out, and then you'll start running your big long piece all the way through. Just come down. I'll nip this end off. You know, you might like to change the size of your bias. You might like to put some thicker stems out. Just experiment and play. You know, and if you put a piece of this down and you don't like it, even though you've pressed it in place and you've set the glue, you can remove it. The glue's not permanent. You can get a wet cloth and dab that glue out. If I want to reapply that, I would still have to put some little dots of glue there. And that's why I particularly like and recommend the Roxanne glue based it, because I just find it's the one that doesn't clog up on the needle. It washes out for me. It's very, very easy to use. So that's how we'll put our bias down, and then we then come back and we'll play with our leaves and position all of those where we would like them to go. You know, you might just like some leaves coming out of here. Just swap your sizes and your colours. But do take note of the photo that comes with your PDF file, because you might like to use the photo that we provide for you as your layout design element. But I've just got one laid out here, and we've already started the stitching on this so we can continue on with it. So you can see how lovely that looks. You can see that I've put these pieces of bias down first. Then I've ran another long piece through here. Then we've just positioned the leaves, different sized leaves. We've used the little bud pattern pieces from the patterns that sheet that's on your PDF file, cut those out, glued those in place, and then we've started doing all the raw edge stitching. So we're going to go to the machine. We're going to thread the machine up with the monopoly clear thread, so you get an understanding how to use that beautiful thread in the top and the bobbin. Then we're going to change to another really nice shiny white thread in the top, and the monopoly thread in the bobbin to do our echo quilting. So we'll do a little bit of stitching. But before we do that, I just noticed I've got to glue these down for you so we can stitch around these. So to glue down, there's no right or wrong side to the petite fabrics. That's what I like about them. I'm just going to put some little dots of glue around here, turn it over and put it in position. Put another one on top, put that in position. Then I might use one of these little ones. And I just think I'll move this down. I think that's going to look better. Now I can just wipe that glue off. Or if you want to make sure you've got all the glue off, just get a damp cloth and damp that little bit of excess glue. Now that keeps moving because my fingers have got a little bit of glue on it, it's grabbing. I'm just going to get this little tool out. This is what's called a stiletto. This has got a little foam end on it and a little pointy end. I just find these are really handy tools to have when I'm doing this sort of thing, because it comes like a second set of fingers for me. And it can just help me position things a lot better without getting my fingers in underneath everything and getting them all sticky. So now what we'll do is press that. Now we're ready to go and stitch. I'm just going to iron these creases out. But how easy is it that we've already got our batting and our backing on there, and all we have to do now is go and stitch around our appliques, come back and quilt, trim it up and bind it. That's all you've got to do. It's a very, very simple process. But this could be a section for a quilt, and if you know about the main thing that I do, it's all about quilt as you go. So this could be a section that you were going to put into a quilt as you go quilt. A lot of times you might be wanting to quilt your background fabric first before you do your applique. But this time we've chosen to do the applique first, and then we're going to come back and do this echo quilting. So let's go on over to the machine and talk about the monopoly thread and getting it set up on your machine. Talk about different feet that I recommend that you use to make this job easy, and we'll get started with that stitching. Right, now at our sewing machine, we just want to talk a little bit about how to set your machine up. We're going to do a bit of free motion work, and we're going to do some work with your normal sewing foot or an open toe foot. So just going to explain a few things to you. If you notice, I've got a mat over the bed of my machine. This is what's called a sew slip mat. You can see that it's cut out around the feed dogs, but this is what the mat is. It's nice. It's a nice size, so it fits on your any size machine. Doesn't matter what machine you've got. You can leave it on your machine and use it with feed dogs up or feed dogs down. So take the brown paper off the back. That's to protect the sticky side that sticks down to the bed of the machine. This hole, the cutout here, goes over the feet where the feed dogs are. So you can put it on so the long section comes to the front of the machine and the short section to the back, or vice versa. But if you have a big extension table, put it on your machine so that the small section comes into the bed of the machine and the large section would go out over the extension table. So that's just something I recommend to allow your fabric to slide through beautifully. It's fabulous when you're appliquing. Really is, particularly when you've got your batting and your backing on there. You want it all to slide nicely. If when you finish with this, if you take it off, wrap it back in the brown paper. If you leave it on there for quite some time, you'll realise that it'll stop sticking. That's when you go and wash it in hot soapy water. But we do put care instructions with that when you do purchase one from us. Now, about our feet. If I was going to be stitching all my designs down with, say, a blanket stitch or a buttonhole stitch or a zigzag on my machine, I would use the open toe foot, a foot that has nothing in the front. Now, for different brand machines, they will look different. This is the one that I use for my Bernina 350. I'm a Bernina girl, so these are the feet that I use. This is great if you're going to echo quilt and you don't know how to free motion to do your quilting. You would use this for your echo quilting, and you can also use it to stitch around your applique's raw edge, but you'll be turning your project a lot, but we'll explain all that as we go through. This one here is the foot that I use for my machine for free motioning. This is a free motion foot. It's got a little spring here. Now, once again, whatever brand machine you've got, it may look different to this one, so I suggest you contact your dealer or look up in your manual if you have one for your sewing machine. But this is a free motion foot that's opened at the front, so it's an open toe free motion foot. Most of our free motion feet are a complete circle or an oval. I find that if I want to stitch right on the edge of something with a closed foot, I can't see. So that's why I recommend an open toe free motion foot. Now, if you're somebody that doesn't know a lot about free motion quilting, may I suggest you purchase one of my Getting Started with Free Motion Quilting, because this has got all my hints and tips in here to get you started with free motion quilting. The next thing we need to talk about is our monopoly clear thread. Now, this comes with this little gauze jacket. It's a piece of gauze that when you take the cover off your thread, you need to put this on, because this is a very, very, very fine thread. It's not monofilament, it is monopoly. Monofilament, most monofilaments can be nylon. They stretch as you wind them on the bobbin, they stretch as you sew with them, they can melt when you iron them. This one does none of those things, so that's why I recommend this. But I call this a jacket. put the jacket on. Now your thread will come out from underneath that jacket. Just find the thread, and that's the thing about the clear thread, it's finding it. So as I sew this, I'll put it down, it might work better. This thread will just come out from underneath the jacket. When you put this on the bobbin, wind your bobbin at a little bit slower speed and only half fill the bobbin, because if you fill your bobbin completely with this thread, because it is so fine, it puts too much thread on the bobbin and you'll find it hard to get off the bobbin winder. So half fill a bobbin with this thread is equivalent to a full bobbin of a regular thread. So when we put it on the machine, you just treat it like a normal thread. You pop it on, put your cover on. Always make sure you put your spool protector on there, or your spool stopper, so your thread doesn't jump around. Hopefully you can find the end of the thread quite easy, and you just thread it up like a normal thread. There's nothing difficult about it. I already have my bobbin wound and it's in my machine. And you could use a normal thread on your machine or a contrast thread if you want, but I find that when you're doing your raw edge applique, a regular thread is very noticeable, and if you run off a little bit it doesn't look nice, but using the clear thread it hides all of those problem areas that you might have. So we'll just get this through the needle. Then I'm going to put my free motion foot on and drop my feed dogs down, and we'll do a little bit of free motion raw edge applique. This is the hardest thing, is actually getting the thread through the needle. And sometimes it's a good idea to put a dark piece of paper behind when you're threading your needle, and then you can see the eye of the needle. Free motion foot on. Now, when we drop our feed dogs, we've all got different devices on our machines to drop our feed dogs. Mine's at the side down the bottom here. Yours might be up higher. Yours might be in the bobbin area. Maybe you can't drop your feed dogs. Maybe you've got a really old machine. But if you put your stitch length to 0, that disengages your feed dogs. So they won't work, which means now when we put our fabric under the needle, it allows us to stitch in any direction without ever turning the fabric. And that makes it really easy to do this sort of work. So we're going to stitch around these buds that we've put on. It is a good idea to pull your bobbin thread to the top when you get started. So just hand wind your needle down, pull your bobbin thread to the top. So all you're doing is pulling your top thread and it pulls the bobbin thread up. That way you're not going to get it all knotted and a mess underneath if your machine may knot up your bobbin thread. So now we can come forward, or I can start by going backwards. Very simple technique. Just do a couple of stitches in the one spot. Now if you've never free motion before, the minute you drop those feed dogs or put your stitch length on 0, your machine's not going to make any stitches for you. You have to make the stitch by moving the fabric under the needle. If you want to learn how to get better at free motion quilting, do some raw edge applique, because it's really going to teach you a lot. And with that invisible thread, nobody's going to see your stitch length. Nobody's going to see if your lines are not straight, because that thread hides it all. So just come around, sew at the speed that you can control the movement of the fabric, because you have to move that fabric to make that stitch. Now I'm going to go around here twice. I'm going to speed up a bit, just so you can see that as you get better and better at this, you can really go a lot faster. I need my needle in the down position, so when I stop it stays down. So just go around there twice, speed up when you feel comfortable. Oops, I went right off there, but nobody will see that. The clear thread hides that for me. Come back around, then you can stop and you can just stitch onto the next piece. And it's really just, it's very naive sort of stitching. Some people don't like this. If you don't like it, use a buttonhole stitch or a blanket stitch on your machine. You could even stitch it by hand if you want to. But it is brilliant practice for you if you want to get better at controlling your fabric under the needle to do more free motion quilting. Now when I've done around there, I can come off. Now I could free motion quilt down these stems if I wanted to. We'll just do a bit of that, but it takes a little bit more control. You really need to have your eye in, watch your needle. But you can see by that open toe foot, it allows me to see what I'm doing. Come back up here, and you notice I'm not turning the fabric. So that's how I would free motion quilt that. Now if I wanted to free motion quilt this echoing, I could come out, we'll just stitch out a bit. Now I could use the side of the foot as a guide along this stem. So I'm now not watching the needle, I'm watching the side of the foot against that bias. Come down. Now I'm watching this side of the foot, so it's important that you've got your needle in the centre position. So now I would continue around these shapes. When I get up to here, I'm now watching this side of the foot. So you can see how easy that is, but I have to have my needle and fabric going at an even speed. Now I could, if I was going to continue echoing, I'd come down and around and I'd keep going around the shape and just keep going. But I just want to go back up now, follow this line, just to show you what echoing can look like when you free motion do it. It's not as even as what it would be if you do it with your feed dogs up. So I'm going to go now and switch feet over to my open toe regular sewing foot, and we'll just switch that out, put this one in, and truly both of these feet are just the best investment I ever made. But contact your dealer to make sure you get the right ones. Quote your model and brand of your machine. Now I'm going to pop my feed dogs back up. I'm pressing the button, but you notice they didn't come up. They won't come up till I hand wind my needle down or till I engage it in my first stitch. So now if I wanted to stitch around these shapes using this regular foot, it would be just normal sewing. You draw your bobbin thread up to the top like we did when we started with the free motioning. It is a little bit more difficult because you're going to have to turn the fabric. But having this slippery mat on the machine allows my fabric just to glide nicely. My needle doesn't want to stay down today. But see how I can just pivot this? So just go slow. So you could do it exactly like this without doing it free motion. So now I will have to stop here and I'll have to turn it round, just roll it all up, condense it down and continue on. Oops, I've got that thread there. So that's how we would do that. Then now if we want to echo around this or stitch our bias on with our feed dogs up, just stop there and cut our thread. Now if I want to stitch the bias on with this foot, it becomes so easy. Line the edge of your foot right to the edge of that bias. So we've got this edge of the foot sitting right on the edge of the bias. Move your needle position over. so that your needle sits right on the inside edge of the bias. So the needle's going to sit right on the edge, the foot's going to sit on this edge. Use the inside of the foot as a guide. Don't watch your needle, watch that foot. Now you can stitch right as close as you've ever stitched right on that edge. Makes it so, so easy. So that's how I get that really neat stitching using that foot. Just get this thread out of the road. Then if you want to echo quilt with this foot, we'll just stitch down here a bit. Now if I wanted to echo quilt with this foot, I would now need to move my needle over because I need to use the side of the foot as a guide against that shape. Now is that far enough across for me? Probably not. So I'll move my needle back over. And that's why it's really wonderful to have a machine that's got a needle position where you can change your needle to different positions. Watch the side of the foot against the side of your shape. And you may find this a lot neater and a lot easier for you if you're not good at free motioning. Up to the top, stitch across. Now if you've got that needle in the centre position, which I don't quite have it in the centre position, I need to change it over. You won't have to keep switching your needle position. So all we're doing now is putting this side of the foot against that previous line and stitching. So you can see by putting your batting and that down first how stitching around that applique is now being part of my quilting. So now when you come around these curves, this is where you'll have to lift your foot a few times. But if you've got the slippery mat on, it guides around there nicely. Oops. And we just continue stitching till we fill up the whole lot with our echoing. And I love echoing for a quilting technique. It really looks very, very smart, as you can see here. It really shows up nicely. And having that clear thread on the top and the bobbin, it shows up that where you stitch that applique on, it is part of your quilting. So looking at the back of it, people would think that you've actually quilted a really beautiful design, but all it is your applique shape coming through to the back. I did that quilting with the clear thread, but on the sample that we have on the work table, we quilted with a regular white thread. So make your choice of what you would like to stitch with, and it's your choice. So let's go back and do a little bit of a review at our work table, and I really hope you enjoy doing this sort of technique. We've got it finished. All you have to do now is trim up your edges to whatever size you want, just tidy them up. Then bind them, bind the edge just with the regular binding. But if you go to my YouTube channel, there's some great videos there on different bindings. We've got bindings with little scrappy bindings, we've got bindings with little peepers or flanges out the edge. We use our sasha tools to do all our different bindings. So go there and find a different binding that you might like to add to your runner. Now just to review a few things, we use the Hobbs Heirloom double-sided fusible batting. I would recommend you give that a try because it makes this process so easy. We use the Oval Mandela tools to do our leaf shapes. I showed you how to use the 3/8 or the 1/4 inch sasha tool. You can buy them in a set of 10 different sizes, or you can purchase them individually, whatever you choose. We use the sasha bias ruler, the Bohin marking pencil, the little rotary cutter. We use the Roxanne glue basted and the monopoly clear thread. Make sure you've got yourself a good pair of sharp scissors if you're not going to cut everything out with the little mini cutter. We use the stiletto, which I find is a very handy tool. The sew slip mat over the bed of the machine makes that moving that fabric under the needle, just so easy. You may be interested in getting yourself a little mini iron. If you get yourself a little mini iron, make sure you lay it down on a trivet like I have here, and you'll find those on our website also. But I find the little mini iron, if they stand up, they keep wanting to tip over and they don't retain the heat like they should. Laying it down on the trivet, you do keep that heat in the iron. We also recommend, if you want to teach yourself how to free motion quilt, get yourself the little how-to booklet that I've written on some hints and tips on teaching yourself how to be good at free motion quilting. So I hope you've enjoyed learning through this lesson. We'd like any feedback. We'd like you to comment if you've made this project. And there'll be lots more lessons there for you to learn from. So stay tuned. Look at our YouTube channel. Have a look around our website. Subscribe to our newsletter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we'd like to keep you updated with everything. So our website address is www.pqw.com.au. So till we meet again, thank you. Bye for now.